Well, Mario, what a weekend in Nashville, Tennessee for the LSU baseball Tigers. They win all 3 games, so if you had faith and went the money line all 3 games with LSU as the underdog, you definitely cashed in big there. The over hit in all 3 games as well, definitely on Saturday. But it gets deeper than even that for LSU. That was just, you really can't. Look, obviously it was a massive series win. To get the sweep was incredible. And they played great complimentary baseball all weekend long. You hesitate to just automatically say that was their best weekend of the year because you could, recency bias, right? It's like, oh, you say that because it's the one that you just saw. But that was LSU's best weekend of the year. I mean, the weekend in Florida was great, but you got beat up pretty good in the first game of that series. The Mississippi State weekend was a really good weekend, and you could look back at that as kind of a turning point a little bit of the season. But the only game you really just dominated was the last one. You had struggles in both the first 2, but you won. You remember that one really more for kind of the best weekend for the bullpen, right? I mean, Georgia was good, but again, that middle game's kind of a black eye for you in that one, and you had to battle really hard in the final game of that series. LSU was completely dominant this weekend in all phases of the game, on the mound, at the plate, in the field, minus, I guess, the second inning of game number 3. But before that, LSU had committed 2 errors, but only one of them was by a position player. The other one was by Mikhail Hilliard. They played great defense behind Hilliard, behind Floyd. It was just very, very good complimentary baseball. You had the frontline pitching from Hilliard and Floyd. It was their best weekend of the year, and it followed their worst weekend of the year. And that just underscores the resiliency that this team has had facing a lot of adversity. There was plenty of times throughout the regular season where they could have packed up and kind of, played down or been down on themselves, none bigger than this spot here, where you were right in the thick of a regional host spot. You had won your last 3 series. You're facing a team with a losing record in the conference in Ole Miss, and they sweep you at home. And now you have to go to Vanderbilt. But instead, they go to Vanderbilt and outscore the Commodores 42-15, hit 11 home runs, and sweep a series in the process.
Remember the first series of the year against Maine, Alex Box?
I do.
A lot of people were really juiced up about that, myself included, because LSU scored 40-some runs over the weekend. But everybody said, don't get too excited. It's just Maine. Well, they did a lot of the same thing to Vanderbilt this past weekend, and I'm pretty freaking excited to see how they're going to build on it now. Like you said, LSU responded to the adversity, and that's really impressive. Could not have been more perfect timing after the sweep against Ole Miss. You had already won the series going into Saturday's game, which is something to be proud of. They get behind, then Braden Jobert happens, and man, they never gave up. They said we could still win this. Our bats are powerful enough to keep us in any game against any opponent, and you saw that on Saturday. LSU comes out on the right side, and now they have to build on it going into the SEC tournament.
Yeah, I mean, look, in that game, you were down 6-0, you were down 8-4, and then you were down again 9-7. I mean, you had 3 different deficits to overcome. And until that 8th inning, each time LSU clawed back, Vanderbilt was able to, extend their lead a little bit more. One more kind of point on the adversity and just the resiliency of this group, and give credit to Jay Johnson and his staff. Give credit to the players for buying in and being that resilient. LSU was swept twice this year. They were swept at Arkansas, and they were swept obviously at home against Ole Miss. And each time, the weekend after, LSU responded by sweeping their opponent. That's the way you do it, right? If you're going to give 3 back, you try your best to get 3 back the next week. LSU was able to do that twice this year, and you never want to get swept, but if you can respond that way, it lessens the blow, doesn't it? I mean, and that's tremendous resiliency.
Yeah, I remember you tweeting a couple months ago after a lot of the same thing. You sweep, you get swept, you sweep again. That's just baseball. LSU's kind of living up to that right now, and we'll see how they carry the momentum. Do want to talk a little bit about Braden Jobert. Before I forget, want to give credit to Bryce Collins, who got a huge bases-loaded double play before LSU made that rally. And after the game, he tweeted out, pitchers are athletes too. And you see LSU's rotation, the bullpens, showing some improvement at a very important time.
And they doubled up Enrique Bradfield on that play, which is just insanely hard to do. LSU did a phenomenal job on him all weekend. He was 2 for 11 at the plate, drew just 2 walks and scored just 2 runs. You kept him off the base paths, and that in turn just stagnates Vanderbilt's offense. Look, when Blake Money gave up the homer to Spencer Jones, that just mammoth shot over the batter's eye, Enrique Bradfield was on first base and was making Blake Money's life miserable. That's what he's able to do. It changes the entire game when that guy's over there at first base, to the point where Dave Neal and Ben McDonald were talking about, shouldn't you maybe just let him have second base at this point? Like, I mean, focus on the hitter, and if he's going to steal, he's going to steal. Like, that's what that means when he's on base pass. Jay Johnson called him the most disruptive player in college baseball. LSU did a phenomenal job against him this weekend.
That they did. And the weekend as a whole had to be the coolest moment of the Jay Johnson era, like you were saying in the beginning of the segment. And it's definitely the finest moment of one Braden Jobert, who ties the school record for RBIs in a game with 9 of them. And the craziest thing is, Musso, is going into this series, he was 1 for 20 in his last 7 SEC games. I had heard Jay Johnson made some small tweaks to his batting, and those small tweaks paid off in a big way for Jobert.
Yeah, I mean, talk about it. That's baseball. But that's what you've seen from Braden Jobert all year. He's a very streaky player, and that's okay, but that's why he's in the lineup all the time, is because he could break out of it and just go on a hot streak at any point. And you saw that this week. I mean, he hit 500 for the weekend, but he hit 500 for the entire week. He was 8 for 16, dating back to the Northwestern State game, with 5 home runs, a double and a triple. He was all over the place for LSU this weekend. He was a massive part of the weekend. And, look, on the broadcast on Saturday, they said, Braden Jobert had the game, but Dylan Cruz had the weekend. And I pushed back on that. Like I said, the guy hit 500 that weekend. He was 2 for 4 with a home run on game number 1. Like, Braden Jobert was there all weekend long, and he was awesome. I do want to say this, too, a couple more things. We could have just done this for the entire show. I just have a lot to say. But Ty Floyd, that was so massive from what you got out of him. That helped. The disadvantage, the mega disadvantage you had against Ole Miss was the frontline pitching. That flipped on its head this weekend. You got 10 2/3 from both, combined from Floyd and Hilliard. Vanderbilt got 4 1/3, I think, out of their starters, or 4 2/3, something like that. That's incredible. And you might have found something there now with Hilliard and Floyd back to back. And it's kind of reminiscent to last year when Hilliard emerged. I mean, look, last year, Landon Marceau was as good as you could hope for in that role in Friday night. It didn't result in a bunch of wins all the time, but he was a frontline guy and kept you in the game, and you needed somebody else. And then Mikhail Hilliard emerged, and that really helped LSU be able to go on that run towards the end of the regular season and get into the NCAA tournament. This might be able to be something similar. See how it goes in Hoover. You'll get 2 games, and those guys will probably get a start each. And if they can replicate that, you feel really good about LSU's chances of making a run at this thing here when you got 2 frontline arms like that. So credit to Ty Floyd, credit to Jason Kelly. They've worked really hard on that curveball. I think the move to the bullpen just did wonders for him. It took so much pressure off of him that was in the starting rotation and allowed him to work on that. And you saw the benefit of it really his last 3 times out, but especially on Friday night. And if they can build on that, LSU might have found a pretty good 1-2 for the postseason.
Hopefully they can. That could be really dangerous if those 2 guys continue to keep it going. And then offensively, you mentioned Dylan Cruz as a whole over the weekend. 4 home runs, more of what we've seen all season. This guy's just an animal. And then another note offensively for LSU, Collier Cranford went 3 for 21 on the weekend, but in that final game, he goes 2 for 5 with 2 doubles. And he's somebody who could also be more of a factor down the road with a little more consistency. I'm curious to see if he can provide that for LSU. If he can, that will go a long way with this team's success.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned Dylan Cruz. Today was named co-SEC Player of the Year, which means everyone's going to make a bunch of co-jokes again, like when he had co-SEC Player of the Week when he went off against Alabama. That was a hell of a race for SEC Player of the Year. When you look at what Trey Lipscomb did at Tennessee, obviously Sonny DeShera, who is sharing the award with Dylan Cruz, but where I think you make the biggest case for Cruz and why he even interjected himself in this race to begin with, but where I think you can make the case that he should have just won it outright is what he did in conference games only. He was worlds better than both DeShera and Lipscomb in just about every stat when it came to conference games only. He was better in batting average. Dylan Cruz slugged 800 in the SEC this year. That is absurd. That was number 1, mind you, so better than Lipscomb and DeShera. He scored more runs than those 2. He had more hits than those 2 in conference-only games. He had more RBI than those 2 in conference-only games. Dylan Cruz led the SEC in home runs in conference-only games. 16 of his 21 homers came against SEC competition. Just a freakish year. You would have loved to have seen him get the award outright, obviously, but Sonny DeShera did have a really nice year. So did Trey Lipscomb. But what Dylan Cruz did in SEC-only games against the best competition on your schedule separates him. Congratulations to him winning that award. I think everyone kind of figured when that guy stepped on campus, it was probably only a matter of time until he took home an award like that.
Yeah, big time, like he's been all season. Hopefully he can continue in Hoover. So it's good news that LSU is playing SEC teams only in Hoover, and he can continue that percentage.
And Hoover, let's talk about that real quick before we get the break. So LSU obviously gets the 4th seed, the first round bye, thanks to Kentucky defeating Auburn 2 out of 3. LSU will play the winner of that matchup, actually a rematch between the Wildcats and the Tigers, the last game of the day tomorrow in Hoover, which means I'm sure it'll start at about 10:30 at night. And LSU will actually play the last game on Wednesday, which means I'm sure it'll start at about 10:30 at night. Do yourself a favor. Do not look at the weather forecast. It is absolutely awful. There will be plenty of delays in Hoover, as there always will be. So a lot of late nights. What does LSU have to do there? I mean, if you're looking from a hosting standpoint, I know what D1 Baseball's latest projection says, and they're pretty good when it comes to their accuracy, but projections are just that. They're projections. LSU's resume right now is damn strong. I mean, 17 conference wins, which is always the benchmark you look at. That doesn't change from year to year. I mean, if you're in the SEC and you get to 17, you're going to like your chances there. You got a first-round bye. You were a top 4 team in the best league in the country, 12 quad 1 wins, a top 20 strength of schedule, a top 25 RPI. Mentioned the quad 1 wins. 9 of your 12 are against top 25 RPI teams right now. It's a very strong resume. The committee has their final say on Sunday night when they announce host sites, and then you get the field on Monday. But, I mean, if you're looking at LSU right now, you've got a really strong case right now to host a regional, doing all you did just in the regular season. But go ahead, leave no doubt. It never hurts to just keep winning and leave no doubt. So go get a win or two in Hoover. Why not? But if it's me, I think they've got one of the strongest cases in the country right now over anybody to host, just as is through the 55 games they played in the regular season.
I agree. You mentioned the D1 projection. I believe they have LSU going to Hattiesburg to visit Southern Miss. And Southern Miss has had a great season, too.
Yes.
Maybe they deserve to host as well. But I'm also thinking in the back of my head, the committee probably wants a regional to be in LSU if it's going to be that close because of all the attraction it's going to draw. It has big crowds in Alex Box every single time, which is going to be a good thing. So it's just aesthetically pleasing, I think, for the committee to put LSU in. And like you said, you would like to leave no doubt. But in my opinion, they've shown enough to host. And hopefully they are able to.
Yeah, well, we will see. But look, you want it to be Auburn if you're LSU, and you think you need a little bit more. You want it to be Auburn because that's a top 10 RPI team. Yeah, I mean, if you can beat them on a neutral field, that's just going to increase your stock. And LSU matches up well with Auburn. I mean, we all remember the 5th inning in game number 1 of that series, and if you don't kick the ball around and you don't give up a 3-run homer or whatever, LSU wins that series over Auburn. So it was that kind of year, but you match up pretty well with that team, and you'll probably see Mikael Hilliard on the mound. I would think he'd be on 1-day short rest. So, I mean, that's not, inconceivable, and you would like the way that sets up if you're LSU.
100%. And don't love the late night, but I'm going to stay up and watch because
I'm
very excited about this.
Absolutely. As long as it doesn't go 17 innings like that game against Mississippi State a few years ago that ended at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Holy Jim Hawthorne.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Todd Walker actually fell asleep during that game. He didn't say anything for like 15 minutes that night. It was awesome.